Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us. We're very excited of having this new episode of our webinar series. We have with us today uh, Doctor and Professor Leonie Jacobs. She is an associate professor of welfare and behavior from Virginia Tech. We just have the honor to meet Leonie like 2 3 weeks ago, and we're very excited to have her today with all her passion. And we were just talking before starting this webinar is that the subject today, chicken behavior, sometimes we take that for granted. Sometimes we think that we know, and this is a very important goal of poultry school, providing very practical information. Like always, this video is gonna be recorded, and then we're gonna be sharing this video in our platforms, and that's one of our main goals, having connectivity and having practical information. So, Leonie, thank you very much for your time, and we are very excited to have you here. Thank you. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me and for that introduction. Yeah, I'm very happy to talk to you about sort of chicken behavior 101. So some of these may or probably will look very familiar, but hopefully you'll learn some new aspects about the behavior, even though maybe the behavior was already well known to you. I'll talk mostly about normal chicken behavior in terms of highly motivated behaviors. So I'm not going to talk much about normal maintenance behaviors like eating, drinking, resting. Happy to answer any questions about those, but I feel like those are inherent to any animal, and I'd like to highlight more specific chicken behaviors today. And then I'm going to go into sort of two examples of abnormal behavior or normal behavior under abnormal circumstances. And this will be, at least the normal behavior part will be structured in a way that I'll show you a video. I'll give you a few seconds to think about what you're observing, what do you see, and then I'll provide some details and insights about these behaviors specifically. All right, so there's 3 different behaviors on this slide. I hope that the videos will work. I'll go into them. So I'll show you the video and then give you a few seconds to think about what it is we're seeing. So especially focus on the bird in the middle. And I know it's a very short video. Then let's go to the second behavior. Not a lot happening there, but I promise even not a lot of movement does not mean that there's no behavior going on or being expressed. And then the highlighted bird in the bottom. All right, so think about the 3 behaviors that you've seen here, and if you can identify them. Give you 1 second. All right, so what do you think the first one is? Most of you probably have guessed right. If you have any experience with chickens, you probably have seen this behavior. And this is dust bathing. So it's a behavior very specific to chickens, right? But the function is somewhat similar to a behavior that us humans show as well. The function of dust bathing behavior is sort of taking a shower. I often refer to it as the bird equivalent of a shower, with the purpose of maintaining their feather condition. So this behavior has multiple functions. It helps remove lipids from the skin. It helps ordering and organizing the feathers to maintain a good coverage and remove any debris and like skin cells from the feathers to keep them clean and well conditioned. Even though that video that I showed you was quite short, the behavior itself is actually quite long. It's a very complex behavior that can take about 30 minutes to perform, but it varies per bird, per strain, per condition. And it includes a whole set of complex behaviors, including scratching with the feet, raking litter or bedding with the beak, and shaking their wings, which is what you saw in that video and sort of see in this picture. What's also interesting about this behavior is that it's socially facilitated. So if you spot one bird showing dust bathing behavior, it's very likely that birds nearby are also performing that behavior. And if one bird starts dust bathing, others will soon join. Even though this is a highly motivated behavior, you don't see it very often. So expectation is to see it once every 1 or 2 days. So it's not very frequent, but that does not mean it's important. And that's reflected in situations where birds or chickens do not have access to friable bedding. When they do not have access to this bedding material, you'll see a behavior which is vacuum dust bathing. And it's called vacuum behavior or vacuum dust bathing because it's performed outside the context. So the bird doesn't have bedding material, but still takes this shower. So it doesn't really have the function that it would normally have, but they are still motivated to perform this. So this shows that the behavior is very important for them and they need the resources to be able to show it. If birds cannot perform appropriate dust bathing, you'll see a deteriorated plumage quality, so the feather quality will be reduced. And if you then provide them with bedding material after a prolonged period of not having access to bedding, you'll see more frequent and longer dust bathing bouts. So this is another indication that they are highly motivated to show this behavior. They really want to do it, even though it's only once or twice every few days. So to the second video, just as a reminder, this is where we saw not very much, but I promise this is a behavior. And this is referred to as perching. And even though this bird was not really on the traditional round perch that you may see with laying hens or backyard flocks, the function of the behavior of just sitting on this little bit of elevation is the same. The function of perching is in a way to avoid predators during rest, so it provides a sense of safety. Even if birds are indoor housed and there are no real predators present, they are motivated to show this behavior. And in this video, you sort of see in the middle, you can see like that wooden bar or elevation. And these chicks are very young. They're less than a week old. And you can see that the behavior is already there. They sit on that piece of wood and rest on their on top of it to get this sense of safety. The expectation of how often you would see it, maybe about 10% of the time during light hours, as you see in this video for broilers. For laying hens, generally they show the behavior a little more frequent, so you would see them resting on a perch about 20 to 40% of the time. And then at night or during dark hours, you can see them resting on this elevated space up to 100% of the time. For broiler chickens, it's important to modify the perches to their abilities. So broiler chickens, especially as they get older, the fast-growing strains are not able to perch on a traditional perch. So an elevated platform can meet that need or fulfill that motivation. So from research, we know that chickens, broilers and hens and other chickens are motivated to perch even if the resources don't allow it. So usually in commercial conditions, broiler chickens do not have access to an elevated resting space. But studies do show that they are still motivated to show this behavior. For instance, they'll sit closer to elevated spaces they cannot access. Sometimes their physical ability does not allow them to perch. For instance, if they're too heavy and they have perches that does not support that extra body weight, you'll see that the birds still have the motivation to perch, even though they do not have the ability. And it can also be reflected in other places that birds will perch on. So people that have maybe some chickens in their backyard or have like more of a extensive production system, or even in intensive production systems, you'll see birds will basically roost on any elevated platform or fixture they can have access to. So you'll see them roosting on feeders, water lines, anything available, just to fulfill that need. So again, this is indicating that they very much are motivated to show this behavior, especially during dark periods, to feel safe. So they'll try and find a way to motivate it or to express it. A sort of nice side effect of allowing these birds to rest on elevated spaces, which also means off the litter, is that it can benefit foot pad health, leg strength, because they have to show that increase in exercise to access those perches or elevated platforms, and improvements in bone density. So it can have actual health benefits to provide these birds, especially broiler chickens, with some resources that they can climb onto. And the third behavior in this video, I already showed it. You can see this bird, although the video is a little blurry, is preening. Somewhat similar to dust bathing in its function, which is plumage maintenance or feather maintenance, especially insulating and waterproofing it, and just making sure that the feathers are in good condition, providing good coverage to protect them from extreme weather or extreme cold and heat. They will distribute lipids from the preen gland, which is just at the sort of the tip of that, well, just above their tail. And they will distribute oil from there across their feathers, so make sure that the feathers are well maintained. This behavior is much more frequent than dust bathing behavior is. So an expectation is to see it about 5 to 10% of their sort of awake active time, or about 20 times per hour. So these are very short bouts of behavior, like there will be a little preening and then they'll move on to something else. So much more frequent than dust bathing, but somewhat similar in its function. Similar as with dust bathing, this is preferred as a group activity, so meaning it's socially facilitated. You'll see multiple birds preening. It's considered a comfort behavior, so it's sort of relaxing to preen, and they'll do it when they feel at ease. However, what is also interesting is that sometimes this behavior is shown in situations where they are stressed or frustrated. So for instance, in the example of perching, if they, for instance, try to access a perch that they cannot, maybe in that situation, the behavior of perching is displaced to preening to deal with that frustration of not being able to access a perch. So it could be an indicator that something's wrong, but definitely consider the context, because it's very much a normal behavior, but they might use it to deal with issues that they can not deal with otherwise. It's the same video again. All right, the next video. So I'll give you a second to consider. what the bird is doing. Focus on the one that sort of has the blue dots on the right. And what's it doing now specifically? I'll play it one more time. We're focusing on the behavior that the bird on the right is doing towards the end of the video. So ignore the preening. Again, anyone who spends some time with chickens will have seen this behavior. So let's see if you got it right. This is foraging behavior, or food-seeking behavior is also what it's referred to. And as with that second name, it's a behavior that serves to search for food. So in a natural habitat, that's the way that chickens will find their food, is by searching in the bedding in the forest or in the fields. So that's a natural behavior for them. And they will do it in a commercial or backyard setting as well. The behavior has a very distinct scratch and peck combination that you saw earlier, and I'll show it in this video as well, where it's like the two leg scratches, then the bird moves backwards and sort of checks out the area that was scratched. So it's a very sort of fixed behavior in a way. However, with fast-growing broiler chickens, they found a sort of a way to perform this behavior, which is a little less strenuous than just walking around all the time, because they are heavier. So maybe then the behavior is modified, like in this video, where the bird is just sitting, but still sort of doing that raking behavior to search for food items in the bedding material. You can expect to see this about 10 to 20% of the time when birds are active in broilers. Hens and other types of chickens will show this more frequently. So about 40% of the active time. And what is very interesting about this behavior is that it's considered contra-freeloading, which means that the birds will work for food or search for food, even though feed is freely available. So in that broiler chicken video that I just showed, the bird is sitting next to the feeder. It can eat all it wants, but still it's motivated to search for food, even though it may be satiated. And there's a very easy way to find food. So this shows that there's some satisfaction for the birds to show this behavior, even if food is freely available. So the behavior in itself is rewarding, and they're motivated to search for food even if they don't have to. And that's seen in other species as well. Then a behavior that's a little different, but probably very clear. And this is a video that I pulled from the internet. I think everybody can guess what this is, but I think the behavior might still surprise you to an extent. So this was clearly a hen laying an egg. This is a behavior you will not see in broiler chickens because they are processed way before they reach reproductive age. So that's why I'm specifying hens in this case. In backyard flocks or slower growing, more extensively raised birds, you might see this behavior that's related to reproduction, but it's very age dependent, obviously. If birds are not at reproductive age, you won't see these behaviors. So what's kind of interesting about this behavior is it's more than just laying that egg. Actually, a whole sort of sequence of nesting behavior precedes this. So first, the hen will repeatedly visit potential nest sites about 40 minutes before the egg is actually laid. Then it'll spend about 20 minutes before that's to build a nest. So this is pecking, raking, collecting materials to get an appropriate nest, threading, so circling around in the area to make sure that there's an appropriate area for her to lay her egg. And then it may take up to about 30 minutes to actually lay this egg. So it's not just go in a nest box, lay an egg, and go out. There's actually a lot more going on in the hen's brain to make sure that the place is appropriate. For reproductive hens, it's possible to see or expect an egg out every day, but it takes a little over 24 hours to lay an egg. So a more realistic expectation when the bird is highly productive is maybe an egg 5 out of 7 days. Egg laying is very much dependent on the season, and not just the season, it's the day length, so amount of light they're exposed to. So if days are short, egg laying will reduce, egg laying frequency will reduce, but this can easily be modified by providing additional artificial lighting. So you can artificially make the days longer if birds are housed indoors, or partially indoors to prevent this sort of decrease of egg production. What's interesting about this behavior is that hens have very specific sort of needs in terms of their nest box. And I think anyone who has experience with hens will have some interesting stories about how all the hens pick one nest box, or how you provide them with 10 nest boxes and they only use those 2 out of 10. And that's just because they have such a sort of demand for specific aspects. So they like it dark, they like it discreet, far away or distance from the rest of the flock, and somewhat enclosed for safety. And research has also shown that laying hens are prepared to pay a high cost to access a nest box. So this can be tested by, for instance, having them push a weighted door to access a nest box, and they'll work very hard with these sort of challenges just to get an access to the box. And this tells us researchers that they are highly motivated to have this sort of enclosed space to lay their egg. So conditions where they're not able to separate themselves from the flock or go into that enclosed area is where frustration can occur. If you do have issues with egg production, this is mostly focused on more of a extensive production system, not really like the big scale commercial systems. I've co-authored an article with some reasons of why hens stop laying eggs. So feel free to check that out, and I can also share the link to this later. And I just wanted to highlight that there are more reproductive behaviors. So it's not just nesting and egg laying. These behaviors will show when birds reach about 4 to 5 months of age. But this is very much dependent on the breed, the environment they're housed in, the sex of the birds, and both males and females have reproductive behavior. So I found some interesting videos. Here you can see a rooster showing waltzing behavior. So this is part of courtship. Oh, it's very short. So very short behavior where you sort of see the bird showing off. And then if the female is impressed with this courtship behavior, she'll crouch down and they can actually mate. For the hen, nesting and egg laying is not where reproductive behaviors end. They will also show mothering behavior if they have access to their chicks, of course. So here's an example that I saw online that sort of nicely illustrates that, where you can see that the hen is sort of showing the chicks where the feed is by lifting up the feed, and then letting it go again. It's telling them like this is food. Do this. So just an illustration of the plethora of behaviors related to reproductive uh, function that you may not see in a more commercial setting. So back to broilers, as you can see, there's 3 videos here. Again, try to think of what you would call this behavior. What do you observe? For this first video, focus on the bird that's sitting right in the middle, in the bottom left video, and it'll be very short. So I'll play it twice. Oh, you saw something? Then let's look at the top video. Focus sort of on the middle and a little bit on the right. Let's watch those 2 again. So look at the 2 birds interacting. All right, and then the third video. So I'll give you a second to think of what this behavior or these behaviors are. These are examples of chickens playing. So maybe somewhat surprising, maybe not. Chickens actually do show play behavior. 3 types of play have been identified, and I showed each one of them. So the video on the bottom left is considered frolicking, which is where a bird just sort of does a spurt of behavior, runs off, flaps its wings for no apparent reason. So you can see the bird just sitting, stands up, flaps its wings, and just runs off. Then this behavior on the bottom video is often referred to as worm running or food running. So the bird with one of the birds with the brown stripe has a piece of bedding material in its beak, and it's running towards and away from the other birds. And then the third video is considered sparring, where you see sort of this play fighting happen. So the function of play behavior is kind of complex. I pulled a definition to just sort of illustrate it, because really play behavior does not have a function. And in that way, its function is to just have fun, right? It's expressing yourself even at the potential cost of immediate survival, because maybe a predator will see you move around. So there's no function to benefit survival, and no function, and it may even limit your survival or reproductive function. We can see this type of behavior a lot while birds are still young. So in broilers, one study found that they'll show play behaviors about 20 times an hour at 8 days of age in a sort of experimental environment. But this starkly decreased as they age. So later on, they only saw it 1 or twice an hour when the birds were 3 weeks old. So very much a decrease with age, like with other species, it's also been shown. And some fun facts are that space availability matters. Providing space to play is important. And one way that's illustrated is in commercial broiler houses. If you walk through the house, some space opens up behind you, right? Because the birds sort of move away from you as you move through the house. If you then turn around, you're likely to see play behaviors behind you, because this open space all of a sudden appeared because you walk through, and you'll see that frolicking behavior, sparring behavior happen behind you as birds suddenly have this open space they can access. In other species, like rats, it's been found that play behavior is associated with um, feelings of pleasure. So it causes the expression of dopamines, opioids. So these are associated with good feelings. And although it's not been directly studied, it is possible that this is sort of the same in other species, including chickens. So it could make them feel good. If you don't see play, especially in young chickens, this could indicate that something is wrong because birds will not play if they're feeling chronically stressed or if they're sick. If there's some problem, you won't see play behavior. But on the other hand, we don't know what the optimum amount of play is. So we cannot say, oh, this flock is playing 10% of the time, so their welfare is good. So it only works sort of as an indicator of potentially something being wrong. But we don't know enough yet about the behavior to say, but this is actually ideal or optimal. And we're talking about birds, so I had to add this sort of pose this question to you. Do chickens fly, right? They're birds. You might think one way or the other, but I found this video on the internet that gives you a clear answer. It is in slow motion. They have wings. They are a bird. And maybe contradicting with general opinion is that chickens can fly relatively short distances, maybe compared to other birds. But I thought this was quite the impressive video for a chicken to fly. So, in short, yes, they do fly. Will you see this bird fly? No. And that's just because broiler chickens are too heavy to ever show cross any type of distance. So, broiler chickens do not fly. Laying hens and lighter breeds are able to fly short distances. So, I just wanted to point that out. So just to summarize this normal behavior, I'm just checking how I'm doing on time. Chickens show highly motivated behaviors that are very important for them to show. And if they cannot show those behaviors, problems can occur. These highly motivated behaviors include dust bathing, foraging, perching, or resting on an elevated space. Reproductive behaviors, depending on the age of the birds, and play. Again, very much age related. And of course, normal chicken behavior includes maintenance behaviors like just eating, drinking, resting, like any animal needs. What I also wanted to do is highlight two sort of types of behaviors that can be considered normal behavior, but they're actually indicating an abnormal situation. So bear with me because that sounds very vague, but I promise it'll become clear. So again, we'll start with a video and a picture. See if you can identify what's going on here. And the bird of focus is not in the video just yet, so give it a second. There it appears. So consider what we see here. So these birds very much have the same type of posture. Although the other is a picture, not a video, we can estimate that the behavior shown is probably very much the same. And it differs from the birds around it. Like the person that's taking the video is approaching, the birds around it are moving away, they're responding actively, walking away, flapping their wings, trying to escape basically, but this bird isn't. So why is that? Well, what we see here is sickness behavior. So it's not really an abnormal behavior because it's normal to respond to an illness, but it does indicate that there's an abnormal health status in this case. Chickens are a prey species mostly, so they will hide any indications of disease until they're no longer able to hide it. So that's very important to keep in mind. If an animal is experiencing some type of pathogen, they will look healthy as long as they can. And when you do see clinical signs of this illness, that's often means it's already very far in its sort of uh, process of infecting the bird. So some indications of sickness are depression, so inactivity, fatigue, a lot of resting, not standing normally or not moving around, just mostly sitting and resting. Birds may be unalert, which you saw in that video. So while other birds moved away from the person approaching, this bird just stayed down, didn't respond to the person approaching, and didn't respond to the other birds sort of stepping away or stepping on it even. Birds will be anorexic, which means they don't eat as much or drink as much. They'll isolate themselves, so you'll often find sick birds in corners or, for instance, hidden underneath the feeder if the feeder is hanging or underneath some type of shelter, so they'll hide from the rest and isolate themselves from the group. And they'll hunch down. So what you see in the picture on the right, but also what you saw in the previous picture. So neck is withdrawn, eyes are closed, they're not alert. They sit down or stand in a hunched position, just sort of coping with this illness. If you want to learn more about sickness behavior, as a co-founder of the Poultry Extension Collaborative, we publish articles every month related to poultry welfare. And we have a very nice article on sickness behavior in chickens and how to recognize it. So I recommend to go to poultrywelfareextension.com if you want to read a little more about that. So why do chickens show this sickness behavior, or how does this pathogen impact this behavior? Sickness behavior, like we can relate to it. If we don't feel good, we show a lot of these sort of similar behaviors, and it's a way to sort of adapt to disease and try to recover. So it will aid technically your recovery if you show these behaviors. So when an animal is infected by a pathogen, the immune response will activate messaging to the brain, and the brain will then activate or stimulate these type of behaviors. And I won't go into much more detail than that, but as I said, there's an article that describes this step by step. Oh, there's the article again. Then we'll move on to the second behavior that is normal and abnormal, depending on how it's expressed. And this is the last behavior I'll cover. So after this, we can do some questions. So when we talk about feather pecking, we consider one hen pecking another hen's feather. So it's not the same as preening, where it's focused on your own feathers. This is focusing on another bird's feathers to peck at them. There have been 3 types of feather pecking identified. Gentle feather pecking is mostly aimed at the sort of gray highlighted area, so the neck, the back, the wings, the tail, and this is a normal behavior. So that's why I was sort of vague about focusing on normal versus abnormal behaviors. Gentle feather pecking is a normal social behavior. It's been associated with sort of social bonding, and it's okay if you see this in a flock, like you want to see this. Birds may peck each other gently, and that's fine. The abnormal behavior is severe feather pecking, which is sometimes referred to also as injurious feather pecking, because it causes injuries. This behavior only develops under certain circumstances. It's a very complex behavior. We still do not fully understand why it develops. We do know a lot of risk factors that can sort of aid in the development of this abnormal behavior. But again, severe feather pecking is the abnormal behavior. Gentle feather pecking is normal behavior. You can see that severe feather pecking is mostly aimed at the same area. So neck, back, tail, and then also the vent area. The third type of feather pecking is aggressive pecking. This is distinct from the other types of feather pecking because it's only aimed at the head. This is technically a normal social behavior that's used in conflict. So when birds are settling their hierarchy or when there's some type of social conflict going on, you'll see aggressive pecking towards the head, which is normal. This is their way to resolve conflict, but it can cause injury. So it's normal, but can be a problem. So I have a table here that I won't go over all of it, but I think it shows a nice sort of distinction between the three types of feather pecking. For instance, I'll get the pointer out. You see that gentle feather pecking often includes more than 100 pecks, while severe feather pecking fewer than 10 pecks. The recipient of gentle feather pecking will mostly stay in place, doesn't really respond, while the recipient of a severe feather peck will move away from the performer. This is because the experience is likely negative. It can cause pain if your feather is forcefully pecked, while gentle feather pecking is considered a positive or a neutral experience for the recipient. So I have two videos here that I'll show a few times because they may not be so clear. When you compare these videos, consider how forceful the peck is, how often the feather pecker is pecking, and how the receiver responds to being pecked at. So this video will zoom in a bit. Hopefully you can see it well. So you can actually see in the beginning two birds and then in the end a third bird joining, pecking the tail of another bird. So consider how forceful the peck is, how often the bird is being pecked, and how the recipient of these pecks is responding. Then the second video is a little harder to see, so I apologize for that, but I think the distinction is still going to be clear. So again, look at the force, how often a peck is performed, and what the recipient does. Now here's another shot. Okay, we'll go just to the beginning again because I think that's clearer than the second part. Peck. And we'll stop it there. So hopefully you see that if we consider the force, the video on the left was much less forceful than the video on the right. So the birds pecked very lightly at the tail, while the video on the right, you saw quite a sort of severe peck where the bird pulled hard on the feather. Then the frequency of pecks differed very much as well, where you saw tens of pecks on the left, while you only saw one or maybe two pecks in the video on the right. And the response of the receiver was also very different. In the video on the left, we saw the recipients actually not doing very much, while the bird on the right, after it or during the peck, walked away immediately. So hopefully it's clear that on the left, we saw an example of gentle feather pecking, this normal social behavior, while on the right, we saw this abnormal, injurious feather pecking where the bird was severely feather pecking the other bird, the abnormal behavior. So one way to sort of look at feather pecking, besides just looking at the behavior, is quantifying feather damage. So if you have a flock of birds, you might not be there to observe the actual behavior, but rather you can just look at the feathers to determine if severe feather pecking or injurious feather pecking is a problem in your flock. So there's this quantifiable scale. There are a few different examples available on the internet if you look for them as a result from various research projects. Here, a score 0 means that there's no or minimal loss of feathers. Score 1 shows that there's slight feather loss, and score 2 shows that there's moderate to severe feather loss. So let's try that out. We have a bird here with a bare spot just by the tail. Would you consider this a score 0, so no or minimal feather loss? A score 1, where less than 5 centimeters of skin is visible, or 2 inches is visible? Or do you think this is score 2, where more than 5 centimeters or 2 inches of skin is visible? So score 0, 1, or 2. I would consider this a score 2 because I know it's hard to estimate the size from a picture, but it looks like quite a large area of the skin is visible. So there's moderate to severe feather loss in this bird. Then another example. Do you think this is score 0, a score 1, or a score 2? Here I would consider this bird a score 0. The feathers look close to perfect, and we don't see any bare spots, so no severe feather pecking observed based on this single bird. And then here we see a bird with an injury to the head. I would consider this a score 2, although again, it's hard to determine the actual size from a picture, but it is quite an injury. However, consider the location of where the injury is located or has taken place, where the pecking has taken place. This is possibly not a result from severe feather pecking, but a result from aggressive pecking. So a different cause with a similar outcome, which means an injury. So there are some clear welfare concerns for the recipients of severe feather pecking. We see injuries like in the picture below. Once the skin is broken, other birds will start to peck this bird and cannibalism will occur. Chickens will eat chickens if the opportunity arises, which can result in increased mortality. Birds that are feather pecked are more susceptible to diseases because they are exposed to this chronic stress. Often it's the same victims that are feather pecked repeatedly, so they'll have to hide away from other birds in the flock, and this will make them more susceptible to pathogen infection. Birds that are severely feather pecked will also need to increase their feed consumption because they don't have that feather coverage and insulation anymore, and will need to eat more to just maintain body temperature, which can then also result in thermal stress because they are more exposed to sort of climate conditions. They are not insulated anymore. So why do birds do this? Why do they develop this severe feather pecking? Well, there's sort of two perspectives we can look at it. And as I said earlier, we don't know everything yet about this behavior. There's many, many years of research where we're trying to figure out why does this behavior develop? And we have a lot of developments in terms of knowing what factors contribute to the development of severe feather pecking. And we know that there are environmental factors that can lead to some type of frustration, which can then lead to severe feather pecking, but still we don't know enough to prevent it. So we've seen that it's been associated with a lack of foraging opportunities. So in birds that do not have access to friable litter material are more likely to develop this severe feather pecking. And it's possible that feathers are sort of a alternative foraging material for them, and they just start working on the feathers because there's a lack of bedding material. That's sort of the one of the easier explanations, but that does not explain why this behavior still shows up in birds that are free roaming in an outdoor setting, in backyard flocks. It can still develop. They have all the foraging opportunities we can provide them. So there must be something else going on. We also know that this is definitely multifactorial. So there's a genetic component. Some genetic lines are more prone to developing this behavior than others. As I said, associated with a lack of foraging opportunities. It's more common in birds that are kept in high light intensity, more common in birds that are kept at high stocking density. We see it more in large flock sizes compared to small flock sizes, regardless of stocking density. We see it when there are nutritional deficiencies. We see it when birds have medical issues. For instance, ectoparasites can stimulate that pecking at the wiggly mites or lice that are on the feathers and then develop into severe feather pecking. It can develop in response to environmental irritants. So these are all sort of stressors that contribute to this behavior, but we still don't know enough yet, as I said, to prevent it completely. And then another issue is that it's a learned behavior. So once there are severe feather pecking birds in a flock, it can spread as other birds see this behavior and develop the abnormal behavior themselves. So there is another perspective, the neurobiological perspective, that I know less about because I'm more the ethologist than the neurobiologist, but I did wanted to just put it out there that there has been some research on the neurobiology of chickens and of severe feather pecking, which have shown that there are imbalances. Imbalances in the neurobiology can trigger this behavior after prolonged stress or after intense acute stress. One indication of sort of a neurobiological issue is that they saw that birds that performed this abnormal severe feather pecking had reduced gut bacterial diversity and lower lactobacilli counts in the gut. And similarly, they saw that if you provide them with this lactobacilli as a probiotic, it prevented the development of injurious feather pecking in hens. And if you're interested in that, I recommend reading the work by Dr. Harlander at Guelph University. And as I sort of alluded to earlier, genetic selection against injurious feather pecking helps against the development of this behavior in future flocks. So there is a strong genetic component that can be impactful. So to summarize this aspect on normal behavior, sickness behavior is normal, but it indicates that birds have an abnormal health status. So it is a very useful indicator to see that birds have an issue. The other example of this abnormal or normal behavior was feather pecking. I've shown you that gentle feather pecking is a normal social behavior. Aggressive pecking is a normal social behavior, but maybe less wanted. However, severe injurious feather pecking is an abnormal behavior that is multifactorial and it's very hard to solve once it develops. We still don't know enough about it to prevent it, and even when it does develop, we don't know enough about it to remedy it once it's started in a flock. So with that, I would like to thank you for your being here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about chicken behavior.
Leonie, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm the first that I'm very impressed, and my mind was going one way to another. And I have just a couple, let's say, questions. Do you know uh, why um, chickens hide when they are sick until they cannot hold it anymore? There is a
Yeah,
reason of that.
at least a theory. That's a great question. Chickens may hide themselves when they feel sick to prevent being predated on. So again, it's sort of out of point of view of safety. If you hide under a feeder, for instance, you're less likely to be eaten by aerial predator. So even in just
Wow.
sort of commercial settings, you'll see them hiding just to sort of protect themselves while they're trying to get over this infection.
Wow, that's a great answer. Maybe this is just myself. I'm very focused besides the poultry industry in human behavior. I'm very interested in that. And obviously, have you learned a lot from chickens and related to human behavior?
Well, I've inter it's funny.
That's a
Inter
yeah, that's because there is so many things. For example, playing. When you play like that behavior of being safe, of being without worry, or just expressing, let's say, fun. When you put that slide and describe that activity, I was related also to us that when we are like in a playful state of mind is when we really can create things. We can create, have a big imagination.
Mhm,
If we are in a fight or flight, we're not really into creation, right?
mhm.
Like
Yeah.
humans. So
Mhm.
so you being day by day doing research and being involved in the chicken behavior, what have you learned something for human behavior?
Well, I see a lot of comparisons like between, as you say, like between humans and chickens. Like I know they're very different and you're not supposed to anthropomorphize, but there's a lot of
Uh-huh.
behaviors that we show that they show and the other way around. So at least I try to make chicken behavior more sort of understandable for humans. An
Mm-hmm.
example with that is that students sometimes are a little like hesitant to interact with chickens. They're a little afraid. And then the chicken pecks them and they are like, oh, this chicken is attacking me. It's being aggressive. And then I like to point out that chickens don't have hands like we do. So they
Yeah.
express and explore with their beaks because that's a very sensitive organ for them with a lot of, I forgot the word. So it's a very sensitive organ. So they can discriminate food from not food, for instance, with their beak very well. So they're just checking you out when they peck you. They're just exploring who you are. And yeah, so that's a sort of an example where I at least explain
Great.
chicken
Yeah.
behaviors to humans, and we
I
apply human psychology principles to our research as well. So
yeah, because at the end of the day, it's natural wisdom. So I don't know if you can see in your inbox questions, or do you want me to read? There is a question
I
from
do see one,
Christian.
yes. Yeah, so I can see it. I can answer it.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, does dust bathing help remove external parasites? And that's a great point. And that's often mentioned as a behavior and or as a question related to dust bathing. And the answer is yes and no. Yes, if the substrate has some like antimicrobial properties, like it's a hard word that I cannot remember now, like dimaceous earth. I'm not sure what how you pronounce it, but there's like this sort of DM, diatomaceous earth, something like that, that has antimicrobial properties. If the birds dust bathe in that type of bedding material, it helps remove external parasites. But some studies have looked at, for instance, dust bathing in sand will help with ectoparasites. And in that case, in those studies, it did not benefit. So it is often thought that dust bathing helps with the removal of parasites, but on its own, if it's not provided with a certain substrate that has those antimicrobial properties, I have not seen any evidence that it helps. Only if you, for instance, provide them with these sort of ectoparasites, uh, killing litter properties, dust, and they dust bathe in that, then yes, it helps. I'm sorry, that was a little bit of a difficult answer, but hopefully it made sense.
Okay, perfect. I have another question myself. Is when you were talking about perching and that they need like a high position, right? Uh, do you think, because when I imagine like a regular broiler house, even we put wire with electricity in the water systems, how that happen in a broiler house, or that never happens because they
Uh,
don't have so much high place to go in a typical broiler house. You just have the feeders and the water drinkers, and then that's all that they can climb up.
mhm. Yeah, sometimes there's like the sort of the feed bins at the beginning of a feed line. Sometimes there might be some like hay bales at the start or at the beginning of the house. So sometimes there are some other items, or like there's a concrete ledge or something as part of the house. They'll perch on those things if they can. Sometimes they'll just sit close to it to like somehow try to fulfill that motivation to perch, even though they physically cannot. So providing perches, and for broiler chickens, that means platforms, not round bars. Providing
Mhm.
these platforms will result in them using the platforms. They are highly motivated to show that behavior.
Do you think that can be like a research, expecting better performance if they feel safe, if they feel expressing better performance? Because I'm very involved in the poultry side, and I have not seen so much perching in the broiler house. But
Mhm.
after seeing your presentation, saying, maybe if we provide a little bit of some perching devices, maybe they can express better or
Mhm.
doing
Yeah,
better
there
performance. I don't know.
there is some research about that already, and in other ends it's still ongoing to look at what the benefits are. But there's definitely benefits shown related to leg health, footbed health. You lower the stocky density a little bit on the litter, so it could technically improve litter quality. Just because birds are off the litter, it could improve like or reduce the chances of breast dermatitis, improve cleanliness. So these are all sort of potential benefits that may or may not have been shown yet, but at least theoretically could occur.
Okay, good. I think we have the last question. We are 3 minutes after the hour. So can you see it from Tarek?
Yes. So the question is, does perching influence keel bone damage? Well, that's another really good question and another can of worms, really, because keel bone damage is another example of one of those welfare issues that's so complex that we have some understanding of how it develops, but a lot of things we still don't know. Uh, in short, yes, perch quality material can impact at least keel bone deformations. Possibly, depending on the locations of the perches, if there's crowding, birds fall off the perch during the night, that may cause keel bone damage, fractures if they like fall and cannot brace themselves. In that situation, yes. So I hope that's helpful. But again, that's a big question because keel bone damage is such a complex problem, just like severe feather pecking is.
Okay, so Leonie, thank you very much for your presentation. I think this is one of the presentations that really feel our purpose and our vision to provide practical information and something that the audience can enjoy and get some benefits of this. We're expecting for more of these. Again, we just before starting this conversation we just discussed about more collaboration. You will be seeing that we're gonna be start sharing your papers and newsletters. We're excited of doing that. We thank the people that joined live and every other one that is gonna be seeing this video later. We hope that this is useful, and we're excited to keep providing education to the poultry industry globally. Thank you, Leonie. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thanks so much for having me, and thanks for everyone showing up today.
Thank you. Bye bye.